If you enjoy hearing these eerie tales and want more to help you drift off or keep you up at night, don't forget to tap the like button. It really helps the channel grow. There she was. True story. I was around 5 or 6 at this time, and we were moving to a different province. We didn't have a place yet, so we were staying at a nearby shelter while looking for one. I forget where the shelter was, but we were told it had been transformed into a shelter after someone decided to make use of the abandoned building. We were told it was half of an institution or something years and years before I was even born. Anyway, we had a strange room. I'd say it was about 8 by 9 foot room with a heavy metal door and 2 bunk beds, one on either side of the room. The bunk beds had metal framing and seemed a tad bit unstable, and the mattresses were hard, and the floor was concrete and not even a tiny window. But we didn't complain because it was temporary. We were the only ones living in a room on that floor. I remember very vividly that my siblings and mother were in the kitchen preparing the food for the shelter as it was their turn. That was part of the agreement to stay there. Plus, there were at least 40 other people. It was 2 to 3 floors and had a basement. I remember going to bed early because I was really tired, so my mom opened the heavy door and let me in the room, turned on the light, and waited for me to climb the ladder to the top of the bed before saying, "Good night." She then turned the light off and I snuggled in the blankets, but I couldn't fall asleep, so I stared at the ceiling. I don't know how much time had passed, but I then heard the bunk bed on the other side of the room creak, as if someone was climbing up the ladder on that bunk bed, right across from mine. And since my older brother was the one who slept there, I spoke thinking it was him, and he somehow quietly snuck in the room to not wake me up. So when I heard the creaking stop, indicating someone was on the mattress across from me, I said, "Hey Aiden, you didn't have to sneak in, I can't fall asleep," only to get no response. This was unusual for him, since he'd usually say something right away, either to tease me or help me sleep, however. I got no response, just the sound of the sheets rustling a tiny bit. I assumed he didn't hear me, so I spoke louder. "Hi, Aiden. Did you guys finish the food yet?" No response. To this, I became a little bit worried that something had him upset, so I sat up and turned my head towards the bed, hoping that I would be able to comfort him if he was upset. I barely got his name out of my mouth when I had realized it wasn't him, but a dark figure, some girl around my age at the time. She had 2 braids and a puffy old-fashioned dress. She had been sitting crisscross, staring and pointing in my direction. I of course got so scared I couldn't scream, thinking if I did I'd be harmed in some way, so I stayed quiet and hid under my blankets. A few hours later, my mom comes in and turns on the light, with my siblings behind her. I seen the light on, so I automatically assumed someone was in the room and I was safe, so I shot up out of under my blankets and quickly climbed down the ladder and hugged my mom. She asked me what was wrong, since I was still shaking. But me, thinking that that girl was still in the room, waited till the next day when we went for our morning walk to explain to her what had happened. After explaining what happened, how I couldn't sleep, and heard someone go on the bunk bed across from me thinking it was my older brother, and then seeing the girl with braids and a puffy dress that was just a pitch-black figure. My mom was horrified, but just to be sure it wasn't my imagination, she went asking people in the shelter about a supposed ghost, giving no details about what I had told her. This lady, we'll call her Courtney, told my mom, "Yes, there is a spirit roaming. It takes the form of a girl and has 2 braids and an old-fashioned dress. She used to visit me every night but suddenly stopped when you guys moved in. We were the only children in the shelter, so that might have been the reason? I don't know." My mom replied to Courtney, "Well, my daughter seen someone with the exact description you had given me, and at first I thought it was just her imagination, or something like that." Anyway, Courtney then walked away. Things were pretty quiet after that. I seen something run in the corner of my eye every once in a while, or hear the sound of knives sharpening when no one was in the kitchen, and the occasional sounds of screaming from the basement when no one was down there. However, it was a family room you could book. One day our family had booked it. There were kids' toys, colored maps, wooden tiled floors, and a TV, We were watching Land Before Time, and I looked on the dark side of the room in curiosity. And there she was, standing in the middle of the dark side of the basement. She ran around the corner. The basement was in a L shape, and we were using half of the L side off it. Anyway, at this point I'm more curious about her than afraid. I kind of thought she wanted to play since she was in the toy section of the room, so I followed her. Thinking it was a game of hide and seek, I stood up from the couch without a word, and my mom asked me where I was going, but I didn't answer and just walked into the dark side of the room, which to her was strange, since I had a fear of the dark back then, as most kids do. She was confused why I would go into the darkest side of the basement, where light didn't reach willingly. She followed me, and I entered a dark closet. I started looking around frantically and kept asking, "Where are you? Don't you want to play with me? Is that why you keep running around me?" I asked over and over, questions along those lines. My mom obviously was concerned, turned on the lights, picked me up, turned off the TV, and brought me and my siblings upstairs. She asked why I was acting the way I was, and according to her I said, "She wants to play." After that, Ma and the rest of my family started getting scratches and tiny bruises mysteriously. Within a week, my mom found a place, and we moved there, leaving our toys and stuff behind, believing the spirit could have possessed them to follow us. We only kept a few clothes, money, food, and hides. We bought new stuff at the store, and lived on the other side of town from the shelter. The Suicide Man. Trigger warning. This was my most recent terrifying nightmare. I've had many, but this one was really different from the rest. So for some backstory, when I was a little kid, I lived in Miami. From the stories I've heard, the neighborhood I lived in was the Hood. When I was about 5 years old, we left. So now into the dream, or should I say nightmare. My parents decided that we were going to visit our old house in that neighborhood in Miami. When we got there, we noticed it was blocked from the rest of the city with a tall metal gate going around the whole neighborhood. The gate didn't have an opening. Instead, it led to a small hallway kind of thing. For some reason, a kid from my current school was now there waiting at the gate with me and my family. So we got inside the neighborhood, and it was run down and broken. Fast forward a few hours in the dream, my fam and friend found my childhood house and decided to check it out. My brother went in his room, my parents in theirs, and my friend, my sister, and I were chilling in the living room. We were standing there for a few minutes when my little sister said something stupid to my friend, like something a 5-year-old would say. I can't really remember. He got pissed and turned to me and said he was going to hit her. He then proceeded to go into another room to get a golf club. I tried calming him down and calling my parent, but no one listened. In an effort to protect my sister, I took like 3 hits with the club. After a few more hits, he picked up my sister and bit her on the neck. I tackled him to the ground, still with my sister in his jaws. Blood everywhere. I tried to punch him, but it didn't do crap, but I kept trying. Few more seconds and I stared, jabbing a stick into his ribcage, but nothing was working. The cops came and took him away. The look in his eyes were unforgettable. I've never seen so much hate in someone's eyes. We stayed in that house for years. I was watching the news one day on the TV that just appeared in the house. It said that my friend went crazy in prison and stayed in his cell for days, never touching light, and that he carved a smile into his face. At the end of the broadcast, it said that he went missing from his cell a few days ago. I broke down because I knew he was coming for me. I grabbed a knife and tried to kill myself. Before I got the chance, I looked behind me, and there he was, bleached white skin, wearing all black, and with a bloody smile on his face. He aggressively yelled, "Suicide," and slit my throat. That was one of the most vivid nightmares I've ever had. It was trippy seeing that same friend at school the next day. The closest thing I could find to the look in his eyes in that nightmare was a picture of Jeff the Killer. But you probably won't find it. And strange experience I had a few months ago. I'm not sure what this would fall under, but it definitely was the strangest experience I've had in years. I work a night shift for a warehouse, won't say which since it's not important to the story, only that I was coming home around 3 a.m. Now I'm out in the country where my home is in the hills, and it's about half a mile from the main road. About halfway up, the nice smooth road turns to dirt, As my wheels hit the dirt, I felt eyes watching me almost immediately. Which normally I wouldn't care because it's normal to see wildlife watching me come up the road. Only as I got to my normal parking spot, I grabbed my pocket knife I keep in the glove box and stepped out. My eyes immediately turned to the direction of a dark patch of woods on the other side of the road. Something told me to look there, and I held my knife up calmly, saying, "I know you're there." As the words left my lips, the world went dead quiet, which is very strange as there is a waterfall maybe 500 to 600 feet away from me, and I can always hear it when I come home. But even it went silent. It stayed like this for a good 10 seconds before the sound returned, and I heard something running away from me. I just kept my knife to my side and walked like I normally would to the house, as I felt like running would have been a bad idea. As I got in, I saw the dogs that normally greeted me weren't anywhere in sight, and they were in the living room, both looking out the window in the same direction I felt the gaze something from. I didn't say anything to my fiancée as she was asleep, and she doesn't have a belief in the paranormal as I do, coming from my Mapuche heritage, South American Indian tribe. I grew up on stories from my dad and had heard the Native American stories of Wendigo, skinwalkers, and other spirits creatures, but since that night I've never felt that same presence. No idea what it could have been, I just know it wasn't deer like I'd normally see around my home.